Before delving into the subject of the Zevitz siblings, or Sarah, we must first acknowledge the pivotal individual who is fully invested in all of their lives. That very person is Sid Zevitz, the founder of Zevitz Enterprise and father to Rudo and Rune. He was the eldest son of the Zevitzes, who were nowhere near the affluence that they are now, and grew up with the mindset that carried over into his future business practices. I knew him since he was a boy, raised in the old slums of Cadia, and we were practically inseparable. I was his first and final friend until the day he passed away. Sid's father was a mess and incorrigible excuse for a man. He was a drunkard, renowned for his violent outbursts against his own family, and a barbarous man by nature. His occupation was completely based on opportunism, meaning that there was never a stable source of income to sustain his family. Everything was get rich quick or nothing. One day, when Sid was 9 years old, his rotten, opportunistic father leapt at the chance to ship back thousands of sediment stones to Cadia, all of which were said to have been completely imbued with purified mana. He was promised a fortune for his services, but never returned to the city or his family. And now Sid, at the age of 9, was left to care for his bedridden mother all by himself. At that time, Cadia was nothing but a small, poor mining town, and the townspeople could barely survive the winter with the little resources we had available. Many people perished during the winters, especially in the slums where both Sid and myself resided. If only we had some kerosene. That was Sid's only concern, second to his mother. We did everything we could to care for Sid's mother, everything within the power of 2 9-year-olds, which didn't amount to much in reality. For 2 years we labored away, doing any and every odd job available around the town, until Sid's mother's time came. She passed away when we were both 11. The death of his mother had an immediate and profound impact on Sid's perception from that year onwards. He became angry, bitter, and resentful. But he did not drown himself in sorrow, not when the world as he knew it was so bleak and hopeless. He realized that unless he acted and used his personal tragedy as a motivator to become something more, he'd become yet another statistic. Once he was unshackled from his beloved but bedridden mother, Sid found another object of devotion to be chained to, for the rest of his life as he knew it. Mana. Of all things he could have chosen to pursue, why mana, I asked myself. Mana was the cause of his father's disappearance, perhaps even death. In fact, if it weren't for the promise of a fast fortune through purified mana, Sid's father might not have gone missing, and Sid wouldn't have had to struggle to care for his mother as much. So why did Sid pursue the root of all his misfortunes? Well, one day, while Sid was laboring away in the coal mines, he discovered a fragment of a sediment stone containing a trace amount of colored mana. He found thousands, in fact, and later smuggled them out without anyone else noticing. He wasn't doing it for the sake of resale, though. He was going to use them for research, which would become the foundation for the remainder of his life.
Yowie! Oh, somebody must have upset the foreman today. He was driving us much harder than usual.
I tell you, Albas, working a coal mine ain't a job for the living. People should stick their necks out for a few stupid stones.
It barely pays enough to put food on the table either.
I feel nothing but seething sore pain.
Regardless of our gripes, we should be grateful to even have employment. Cadia is heading into a downward trend day by day, and this year's winter is supposed to be even worse than the past.
I guess we better count our fortunes then, Albus. At least we're stifling and scorched when we're working our butts off.
Agreed.
Even if I could afford an education, I don't think I'd be able to sit still for a single minute. I learn best when I'm on my toes.
Who needs school, anywho? We're doing just fine on our own, Albus. I suppose we are. That reminds me. Get a good gander at this, Albus. Sid. Is that what I think it is?
You betcha! A sediment stone. It's a pretty crude cut, but it's got some colored mana imbued within.
Where did you find this?
Inside the damn coal mine we work in every day, Albus. I think it might actually be a mana mine.
Sid, what are you going to do with it? You're not thinking of selling it, are you? Don't you know how Cadians feel about mana crafters? If you're caught selling that stone, they'll throw you in prison.
Have some faith, Albus. I wouldn't sell this precious sample, no. It has too much value as research material.
Research?
I know you won't snitch on me, but to tell you the truth, this ain't the first sediment stone I found in that coal mine. The first sediment stone I found that was like this was no bigger than a speck. The further I dug into that area, the more sediment stones I kept unearthing, like gems. I finally struck a cluster of sediment stones.
Sid, have you been sneaking them out of the coal mine?
Hear me out. I got something of great interest to show you later. Stop by my laboratory in an hour or two.
What laboratory? Do you mean your house?
I'm calling it a laboratory. I wish you'd call it the same too, Albus. Does the phrase, "let's meet at my place," instill a sense of urgency or mystique? I think not, Albie, old boy.
Stop trying to talk like an old fogey, Sid. You need years, wrinkles, and a lot of white hair first.
Just stop by later.
Why don't I just go over right now?
Well, here's the thing. It's, when my mom passed away, Albie, I thought I'd leave her a flower or two on her grave.
It's already the first anniversary. Time flies.
Anyways, just meet me at my laboratory in an hour or two, and I'll be back around then. Years after Sid shared his secret with me, we began experimenting with his countless sediment stones in order to find a way to convert the colored mana into purified mana. Even though Sid's father was one rotten bastard, Sid inherited his reckless penchant to dive headfirst into something that piqued his interest. We shared many of those reckless experiments from the comfort of his laboratory. We devoted our youth to researching mana, as if it were driven by some sort of invisible force for a better future. There were times when experiments were wonderful successes, and times when we regretted conducting them. One of those regrets resulted in a self-inflicted mana shock syndrome and caused Sid to temporarily lose all motor functions in his left arm. But one day, we finally succeeded in answering the big question. We had successfully converted colored mana into purified mana. We noted our procedures, we performed the experiment, we made the discovery of the century, and word of our success spread like wildfire throughout the outer pole. We patented our procedure, and we were ready to sell the untapped energies into homes throughout the continent. But we lacked one crucial component to spreading the fruits of our labor.
Why, Sid? Tell me why we bothered wasting away our years on colored mana conversion if we're not going to sell it. We need investors to spread our groundbreaking research around the outer pole, Sid.
We can't even think about expanding until we figure out how to get a consistent and stable output of purified mana out of these filters. If a single sediment stone has a low concentration of colored mana, the energy output through the filter will be equally low. We need to make sure all sediment stones contain a proportional amount, and contain enough colored mana within to outperform a burning candle. Our research is riding on drawing out colored mana from sediment stones, Albus.
I'm not talking about the long term yet, Sid. We need to think about now and getting funding in order to expand and perfect our research.
Albus, have you heard of electricity before?
Electricity? Oh, the electricity generated from lightning bolts, if I recall. I heard someone from the third sector was trying to harness that very power.
That's right.
But that research is still very much in its infancy, and nowhere near ready to be implemented beyond a laboratory setting. I hear the nature of that research is also quite hazardous as well. There's too much uncertainty surrounding the subject. It's under much scrutiny by the Board of Academics, particularly on the outlook of immediate implementation.
Academics schmacademics. I don't believe a word they breathe. If I didn't stumble upon that treasure trove of sediment stones all those years ago, I would have probably pursued the study of electricity as well. Besides, Albus, who's to say that the nature of our research isn't hazardous? Heck, I bet lightning's a much better playmate than natural mana. Depending on the day, lightning might kill you or spare you.
Why would you say that?
My left arm's been acting up again lately, Albie.
Do you feel any intense pain still?
Well, it's not the pain that's getting at me. If I had to describe it, sometimes it feels like the flesh on my arm is melting off the bone, like it's being drenched in acid. That can't be good.
Has it been that way since you regained control of it?
No, it was all good until recently, Albus. I didn't say nothing at first since it never got in the way of our research and our work, but it's been hard to ignore lately.
What could be causing it?
I ain't sure, Albie, but for all our breakthroughs in research in all forms of mana, we still know jack squat about its effects on the human body. We continued our research into solving the proportional division that we observed during purified mana conversions and eventually discovered a solution. It wasn't long before we chanced upon a group of investors who were genuinely interested in our research. We made it through life with dumb luck, I always said, but Sid always countered with, "There ain't no luck out there that's dumb enough to help our sorry butts." We made this happen. Years passed after our newfound success. Our research was being applied in a real-world scenario, and we both continued to constantly improve on our foundation. In time, Those very same investors helped us immensely in the establishment of Zevit's enterprise. It was around then when Sid met a girl who had just moved into Cadia. Her name was Eileen Klaslow. Eileen had unnaturally beautiful eyes of emerald, glistening, pearly white skin, and a wonderfully sweet smile. She wouldn't take any sass from a single person, was overly outspoken, and also strong-willed, but she, like Sid's mother, was fragile from birth. Her only wish in the world was to do something beneficial, not just for Cadia or the Outer Pole, but for the whole world. She was a darling woman if ever I've met one. Her presence alone would give cheer and joy to the people around her, even people with the toughest exterior would just melt into a puddle at the sound of her sweet voice. But as far as the general populace was concerned, Eileen Klaslow was a goddess in the guise of an angel. And all the while, Zevit's enterprise was growing substantially, but we weren't driven by profit. We did our damnedest to save lives during our first winter in Cadia, and made sure that our services were affordable enough to meet that end. Our consumer base wasn't as vast as we expected, but by the end of the harsh winter, almost every one of our customers survived. We left our mark in Cadia that way. As we bathed in the fame and glory, being hailed as the quellers of the cold, Sid and Eileen's first child was born. Rudo. I never knew a more intelligent child in my life. Nurtured by Eileen's warmth and gifted with Sid's brilliance, Rudo was raised with the best of both worlds. We all lived such happy days, painted with the promise of even better ones. If only we had kept our eyes peeled over the horizon and not been blinded by our bountiful boon, so we would have noticed the emergence of the greatest threat to our existence.
Sid, Eileen, did you hear yet? We have competition. High-Vis Corporation.
High-Vis? Ain't that the name of that Nimrod who tried to tame lightning before tossing it all out in favor of mana?
Oh, I've heard of them, but just rumors.
The rumors are true, Eileen. They're using the filter that Sid patented to convert colored mana into purified mana. Shall we pursue litigation for copyright infringement?
Nah, leave 'em be. Those filters are relics as far as I'm concerned. I ain't got no use for 'em anymore anyways.
But dear, doesn't the fact that they're using your filters mean they're gunning for you?
High-Vis must feel bitter and resentful for his failed research into harnessing lightning, so he's lashing out at you, his competition.
Ah, sounds like your run-of-the-mill short-sighted bastard. He could have stuck to what he put his name and faith in, continued his research, but instead he's taking a pot shot at our success by diving headfirst into an already full pool. And to think, that bastard has the nerve to use his direct competitor's invention to find his corporation, compete with a tried and true enterprise. Pfft.
Well, when you put it that way, I must give him credit for his complete disregard for the concept of shame. Although, his blind recklessness does remind me of a certain someone.
Say what, Albie? I may be a reckless risk-taker, but at least my well of innovation hasn't run dry enough to resort to thieving.
Touché. You may be correct to dismiss the trivial matter of the obsolete mana filters. They might just fade out of existence if their aim is to topple us with our old filters.
Nobody knows what the future holds, Albus. We're up against a shameless bastard who'd use his competition's own product against him. While Hivas will never be capable of innovating ever again, don't expect him to die out by the time winter's around. Eileen, what's the matter? You look pale.
Sid? I can't explain why, but I just had such a bad feeling.
What's there to feel bad about?
Don't you think our lives have been going on a little too smoothly? Nothing bad has happened to any of us or your company since its establishment. I just feel like this can't be a coincidence.
Come on, Eileen. Since when did you turn into such a superstitious worrywart? Neither Albus nor myself has done anything to warrant any worries. We never stole anything, or killed anybody, or cursed a single soul. We owe nothing to nobody.
I suppose so.
Years after making this statement, sweet, darling Eileen gave birth to her daughter, Rune. That's when our fortunes started turning on us. Hivas' expansion throughout the outer pole exploded, rivaling our company's size within a matter of years. When it came to the know-how of mana, its workings, or our advanced research, there was absolutely nothing to compare. And yet, for some inexplicable reason, they managed to become a real threat to our existence. Nobody, absolutely nobody, could have foreseen their explosive growth. With the availability of purified mana for consumer use from an entity that knows as much about it as it does lightning, the threat of misuse became a niggling fear. As with the experiment that had gone awry in our youth, causing Sid to experience chronic episodes of pain, Mana had once again poised itself against us, and the rest of the inhabitants of the outer pole. We knew little about the effects of natural mana on the human body aside from mana shock syndrome, and so Sid took precautionary action. Sid convinced our longtime investors to invest a grand sum into the medical field, with a little persuasion to the company's deep-pocketed investors, in order to advance medical research into the profound effects of mana on the human body. Sid, who was now leading medical research, had appointed Eileen as the acting CEO of Zevitz Enterprise, and hired physicians in all relevant fields for his newest addition to the company, the Zevitz Medica Group. The goal of this group would be to attend and serve as primary care for Zevitz Enterprise's mana mine workers or laborers. Zevitz Enterprise invested heavily in training procedures and preparatory field cases. However, it would be a good deal of time before any of these healthcare workers would even begin caring for mana mining laborers or sediment stone classifiers. Unlike High-Ves Corporation, we sought to retain and look after the health of each and every one of our laborers and workers. They were not expendable, unlike the workers being exploited by our competition. Their method of exploitation, while completely ignoring the safety and well-being of their workers, was simple. They employed an immunostimulant known as Process 1, or P1, which contains antibodies to make the user more resistant to the effects of colored mana on the body, allowing them to work throughout the day and night. The users, who were offered the incentive of permanent employment, willingly allowed themselves to be injected with regular doses of P1 and would henceforth be known as subjects. Subjects were not only granted with the benefit of immunity to lesser degrees of mana shock syndrome. Their bodies were also observed to feature an abnormal increase in muscle mass, as well as bone structure growth and an additional boost in energy. High-Ves capitalized on these benefits and employed a large force to constitute the grand majority of their workforce. In a time where work was scarce and the grand majority of the outer pole was working class, they all flocked over to High-Ves. They had a firm grasp over the hearts of the people, despite our best efforts to appeal the long-term healthcare provisions for our workers. This was when I saw the specter of Sid's father arise and sway the populace with his unsustainable get-rich-quick creed. Hey,
That was horrendous.
tell me about it.
I never thought the excessive use of P1 would lead to such a sickening sight.
What can one expect from a mind freed of natural fatigue? They've become withered shadows of their former selves. Likely, prolonged ingestions of P1 caused the user to build up a tolerance to its mana immunity properties, till it became ineffective against mana shock. High-Ves flooded a local abbey with all of their permanent employees who had succumbed to it. They had to turn away most of the incoming afflicted to a church in the neighboring town.
Oh, the irony.
That's not all I have to report, Sid. We have another problem. When Eileen, the Medica Program's director, and myself went to the Abbey and made our proposal to build a new Zevitz Medica hospital for general care in the area,
The fat friars gave you the stink eye, huh?
they assailed us with rather abhorrent, unbecoming things in the names of the Abbey's apostles. The friars blamed us for the calamity that befell the afflicted there, cursing us for committing sacrilege against their mana deities. Even the abbot accused us of being blinded by our pursuit to better people's lives, and the deaths of High-Ves's workers were retribution for our sinful acts. Cinchmen, I cannot discern the veracity of the head priest's allegations, but I am of the opinion that, as of this moment, our only prerogative is to put our plans for constructing a new hospital in that town into action.
Oh, why doesn't the Cadian government outlaw the application of P1 for human trials altogether? It would spare all those poor people from suffering so. Sid, if you could convince the Board of Academics of P1's danger, maybe they could convince the government.
I doubt that, my dear.
Why, Sid? People are dying. Our people.
Well, I guess it has something to do with the patented project. Patented production of P1 on the outer pole. Now, producing P1 takes a lot of know-how. Can only be done by the people who know how to extract colored mana through mechanical means. Otherwise, there's no other means of extraction available to us. So, here's my take on the whole situation. Despite its harmful side effects, the Cadian government can't afford to outlaw P1. Not when they're secretly involved with the exportation of our only domestic product, second to coal. They're in cahoots with High-Ves and probably the Board of Academics for that matter.
What? Why would they do that?
Isn't it strange how High-Vez's workers suddenly shrivel up even though they're consistently administered P1? A single dose should keep them going for an entire day. Well, I figured that before High-Vez gives them another dose, they probably extract whatever's left, like how mana crafters extract purified mana. They could probably synthesize even more P1 from daily extractions. Whatever they could be using all these immunostimulants for, though, is anyone's guess. They could use it to give birth to enhance the aggression of their army, or they could even weaponize the damn drug.
No.
That's just my take on this dreaded mess, my dear. I don't have a lick of evidence to back up my claims.
Historically, the worse the situation is, the higher the likelihood your predictions are correct, Sid. Evidence or no evidence.
Let's leave the suppositions and trends alone for now, Albie. It's time we get back to the topic at hand. On the issue of forcing our expansion and initiating the construction of a new Zevitz Medica hospital, I completely share your sentiment.
But Sid, you're forgetting about the perceptions of the public. When it comes to houses of worship, they'd rather seek salvation than have their lives spared by doctors. Assuming that the current scenario will still be in play, even if you pull through and build the new hospital, the chances that they choose to go to Zevitz Medica over an overcrowded abbey are slim.
You have a point, but why? What did we do to deserve to be brushed aside and distrusted? If anything, we helped save lives during our first year as a company. Don't people remember that awful winter?
If I had to guess, Sid, the fact that we're a private and for-profit company, much like our competition, automatically makes us less trustworthy than an abbey.
I'm not opposed to the idea of building a hospital, but given our present circumstances, there's very little point in purpose.
Well, what then? What do we do?
Sid, I have an idea.
What is it?
Your theory about the Cadian government being aligned with High-Vez has got me thinking. Why don't we just align ourselves with the abbey? That way we could pave the way for the new hospital with their full support.
Come again?
We'll have to invest in the abbey first. Perhaps we can purchase new furnishings, or even renovate the outdated architecture. We could even name the new hospital after the abbey. And in exchange, the Zevitz Medica Group will serve as the hospital's administrators. This arrangement would allow Zevitz Enterprise to retain full ownership of the hospital in exchange for a few concessions.
Impressive.
The clergy will reign only in name, while their gods govern from above.
Hold on just a second, my dear. Now, your plan is very grand and has left me at a loss for words, but what would compel them to want to work with us? They clearly despise everything we represent and stand for.
Well, we can do something about that.
We can?
A few days ago, I heard about the passing of several of the Abbey's sisters after being infected with mana shock by the afflicted they attempted to save. The souls in their care are crazed and violent, and need to be restrained in order to administer treatment. Several sisters died recently because of this, so with care and compassion as their only weapon, they tried to reach out to the victims. They did everything they could to provide adequate care to the subjects, absolutely everything within their power. I propose that the next stage of the Absolute Obedience Automata project be dedicated to the memory of the Abbey's fallen sisters. We should reprogram the automata to prioritize supporting the Abbey's sisters in their line of work, and lower the priority of mana dowsing. If at all possible, the exterior features should appear more human as well. They will be assigned to guard and protect the sisters from any in their care who exhibit severe infectious symptoms stemming from mana shock and P1-fueled aggression.
Eileen.
That is a spectacular series of ideas, and it just might be within the realm of reason. I'll draw up a new design incorporating these features and submit them to our partners for manufacture.
There's a sort of poetic justice to all of this. We make a living selling our groundbreaking research, all of which is rooted in science, and yet we gotta depend on theologians to survive.
Do contrasting ideologies really carry any clout when both parties benefit from finding common ground? Our prerogative now is to care for the victims afflicted with mana shock syndrome, and to prevent any future cases from occurring.
Several days after our impromptu meeting, we all ventured within the confines of the Abbey.
Thank you so much for watching this most recent episode of Fault Milestone 1. We will continue Albas's jaunt down memory lane in the next episode. And if you would like to watch this series from the beginning, you can find a playlist on my channel at youtube.com/presshearttocontinue. And while you're there, if you would click the subscribe button, that would be awesome. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye!